I'm Michelle Gussow, and this is something straight out of my mind.
So we've all had them. I call them TV crushes. Um, I'm not going to call anybody out because I know I've got friends who've had their crushes. My brother-in-law won't mind me saying he's had a crush on Laurie Saunders from Petticoat Junction since he was little. And my first TV crush was when I was very young. I was 5 years old, and I was in love with Kent McCord from Adam 12. And at the time, like I said, at 5 years old, I would have told you I'm going to marry Jim Reed. Now, I can't tell you how long that lasted or when it dissipated, why it did. Maybe it just grew out of it. But I always say that was my first, and it certainly wasn't my last. I went through a plethora. I had a TV crush on Christopher Knight. That's Peter from the Brady Bunch. I had a crush on David Cassidy. I guess that was a pretty typical one. But a crush that started for me in January of 1977. And at the time I was 13. I was in the 8th grade. And this crush lasted 37 years. That's a long time for a crush. The fact that it just went past my teen years and did not seem to leave as I grew up. Look, I didn't think anything of it at the time, but I look back and go, I don't know how that happened. Maybe I should have grown out of it. I don't know. But the person on the receiving end of the longest TV crush, maybe not in history, certainly my life, was Mike Stoker, who was the engineer on the TV series Emergency. He was somebody who could have almost been maybe I'm going to say movable scenery. I don't know. I mean, he actually ended up having more things to do, but I think it's just that people did like him. But what happened with Emergency is that only an actual firefighter could drive the engine. So they found this relatively good-looking fireman who was, I guess, had a SAG card. I think that was the thing, that for some reason he had a SAG card, and hired him to be the engineer on this show. And I think I'd watched it enough time, over and over before it actually hit me that, hey, I really like him. It's just somebody who's not in the, where most people, I think, out of that show, and I'm going to say, if I look at the fandom, now I don't know what would be today, but let's say it was, 10 or 15 years ago, looking at the fandom, most people did seem to gravitate to Randolph Mantooth, who played Johnny Gage, or Tim Donnelly, actually, who played Chuck Kelly. Those seemed to be the two top crushes that people had, that they talked about. I will say I actually found other people who were in love with Mike Stoker. And I actually liked finding a community of people who liked Stoker. So, this crush started back, like I said, it was 1977. And I became one of those people who watched his every move on the show and waited with bated breath to see if they actually gave him a line in that episode. And what's interesting is everything that came out of the man's mouth became somewhat iconic eventually on the internet, within the fandom. People know his lines. I mean, they were so few and far between. Most people will remember some line. There was an episode in the last season, for instance, where the big problem was that Roy's mother-in-law was going to be coming, and he was dreading this visit. And everybody was trying to come up with ideas how to handle it, and he was going to give up. And they turned to Stoker, and he said, well, it seems to me the best thing you can do is learn to live with it. And that one line, that was his only line in the episode, and it became this, like I said, iconic line. In the fandom, everybody would use it if they were writing fan fiction. They would make sure that Stoker would say that was his philosophy for things. But I think I had crushes that probably ran alongside that one, but that one was just a constant crush, and I didn't quite think about how long it was going on. I think a couple times I looked back and was thinking about it, it's like, boy, I've really liked him for a long time. I think one of the times that it really hit me how long this had been going on is when the internet came into being, because I think, like a lot of people, what you do is you go look up the stuff you like, right? And so I popped his name in there. And at that point, I think it was 1999, 2000, when it first dawned on me, it's like, wow, I've really liked this guy a long time. And as I said, I was thrilled to find other people who liked him. And one of the things that I did, for anybody who knows from some other videos, that I did write, I haven't really written any in a long time, but fan fiction. And I had started writing for the Big Valley in 2000. And what I finally did was insert myself into my own crush. And I made myself Mrs. Mike Stoker and started writing emergency fanfic based on that. And if anybody wants to read some of that, I will put a link in the description. But it was fun for me. I always said, live big, this is your fan fiction life. And I had a whole family for us. I gave Mike a brother and an annoying aunt and some cousins that you hear about, and I brought my sister and her husband into it, and it was a lot of fun. I still do have fun reading the stories again, looking back on what I did. But all of a sudden, and I don't know how it happened, he just didn't appeal to me anymore. I mean, and somehow there's like this moment of like, after so long, how did this happen? And it turned out it was like 2014. And what had happened is my sister has the DVDs, and I would borrow them to watch the episodes that were really Stoker heavy, let's say. And I had popped in I'm going to say the Stoker episode, and I think if you are a fan of emergency, even if you're not a fan of Stoker, you'll know the episode. It was called The Great Crash Diet. And it was this episode where Dr. Morton came and said they were going to study diet with the firefighters and see what effect it had on their health. And Chet, being Chet, just went too far. Now, the thing about this particular episode is it was very Stoker heavy. In fact, it was the most Stoker heavy episode there is. The one, I should remember the title on this, somebody will tell me, but I think the one that comes in second is the one with the baseball game between the department teams. And it goes down as the only time when they got a run that Mike went into the little cubby and said, Squad 51 KMG 365. And all the Stoker people go, ooh, you know. But the Great Crash Diet, Mike has more lines in that than he'd ever had. And it's very memorable, and you get a lot of Stoker. And so I'm watching this episode, and my usual reaction to seeing him wasn't happening. And, I was looking at him. And at one point, even in the show, I was getting bored with the episode. Not necessarily with him specifically, but with the episode. And I remember thinking, what was I thinking all these years? And it was just gone. And I realized, and when I turned off that DVD, I remember actually doing the math and thinking about, my goodness, this lasted like 37 years. What a strange time for it to just go away. I still wonder about that. I don't, it's not like I miss the crush or anything. But, yeah. It's had a couple replacements. Even at my age, I still crush. I will tell you that right now, the absolute love of my life is Ricky Nelson. That's been going on since 2016. I may discuss that in another video. In the meantime, tell me your TV crush. Maybe you had a crush from Emergency. Maybe you shared in the Brady Bunch. Maybe you shared my love of Kent McCord. But let me know, and I'll talk to you again when there's something straight out of my mind. Thank you for watching, and please help support Cat's Haven Cat Rescue with the purchase of items from one of the links below.